For years, Logan Carter prayed for a miracle. His daughter, Grace, had lived in complete darkness since the moment she was born. A former Navy SEAL turned janitor, Logan crossed every state line he could, begged every specialist he found, and spent every dollar he had. Nothing changed, not even a flicker of light. Then one summer afternoon, a homeless 11-year-old boy stepped out from the edge of a crowded park, thin, barefoot, carrying nothing but a courage far larger than himself. He reached toward Grace's eye with steady hands and a quiet certainty that felt almost heaven-sent. What happened next lasted less than 30 seconds. A thin membrane lifted. Sunlight touched her vision for the first time, and the first word Grace spoke as her world opened was "Dad." But what Logan did for that boy, guided by faith, gratitude, and something greater than chance, is the part no one sees coming. Before we continue, please share this video, leave a comment telling us where you are watching from, and subscribe to the channel so more people can witness stories of hope and grace. The summer of darkness, the August heat rolled in from the Gulf, settling over Tampa like a heavy quilt. Logan Carter paused on the narrow balcony of his second-floor apartment, listening to the hum of traffic rising from the street below. He was a man built from weathered muscle and old discipline. In his early 40s, tall and broad-shouldered, with the squared frame of a Navy SEAL who had spent half his life carrying more weight than most men ever would. His jaw was sharp, covered in a short, neat beard that could not hide the faint scar running along his chin. A few pale threads of silver crept through his dark brown hair, and despite the summer glare, his eyes remained steady and cautious, the deep brown of old earth. They were the eyes of someone who had learned long ago that quiet observation could save a life. His left knee stiffened as he stepped back inside. The injury dated back to a rescue mission overseas, a night of running through broken stone and gunfire. The surgeons had tried to fix it. Time had done the rest. Still, he carried the ache like a private reminder of all the parts of his past he no longer talked about. Duke padded across the living room the moment Logan entered. The 5-year-old German shepherd moved with practiced confidence, his black and tan coat sleek and well-kept despite the Florida heat. His ears were alert and his eyes intelligent, the amber color bright yet patient. The harness across his back read, "Service Dog, Do Not Pet" in clean white lettering. Duke had once belonged to Logan's team. Now he belonged to Logan's family. He stayed close, sensing moods as other dogs might sense storms. In the corner of the small room, Grace Carter sat cross-legged on a soft gray rug. The 6-year-old girl had a slight frame, light brown hair gathered in a loose braid, and skin pale from a life without sunlight. Her eyelids fluttered gently as she listened for the sound of her father's boots. Grace had been blind since birth, her world an unbroken canvas of darkness. She navigated with careful hands, open palms, and an ear finely tuned to her surroundings. When she smiled, it was quiet and unassuming, as if she were afraid the world might take it back. "Morning, sweetheart," Logan said, lowering himself beside her. He brushed a thumb over her cheek, the gentleness at odds with the combat calluses that never fully faded from his skin. Grace tilted her head toward his voice. "Is Duke here? He's right beside you." Duke lowered his head, nudging his muzzle against her shoulder. Grace reached up to feel the shape of his face, tracing along his fur with soft, practiced movements. Duke stayed still, patient as the tide. Logan watched them, feeling that familiar pinch in his chest. He remembered the day the doctor in Norfolk said the words, "congenital optic anomaly and no known corrective path." He remembered selling his truck, pawning gear, signing away every last emergency fund he had, 17 sol. Specialists later, he was left with medical files thick as textbooks and answers as empty as sea foam. The words still echoed at night. Prepare for permanence. He would have given his other knee, his hearing, his memories, anything, if it meant letting his daughter see a single sunrise. But the world didn't bargain in equal trades. The room was small but tidy. Logan had a habit of keeping everything organized, his clothing folded with military precision, surfaces wiped down each morning, even the toys arranged in neat rows along the wall. Structure had once kept him alive. Now it kept him sane. "Are we going outside today?" Grace asked. Her fingers curled lightly over Duke's harness strap. "If you want," Logan answered. "It's hot, but the breeze might help." Grace nodded. She liked feeling the wind on her face. She said it felt like the world speaking without needing to be seen. Logan stood, stretching the stiffness from his back. His shirt clung to him, the navy fabric darkened with summer sweat. He dressed simply, jeans, boots worn at the heels, his old SEAL team watch on one wrist. He didn't wear medals. He didn't display photos. Everything he had been belonged to a life he no longer allowed himself to revisit. He opened the closet, pulling out the faded backpack that held Grace's water bottle, sunscreen, and the medical papers he carried everywhere out of habit. Then he took a slow breath. Tonight, he had another shift at the community college where he worked janitorial duty. 12 hours of mopping halls, hauling trash, fixing clogged sinks, listening to the metallic whir of the industrial vacuum. He used to move through enemy compounds with a rifle and night vision goggles. Now, he pushed cleaning carts beneath flickering fluorescent lights. Most days he accepted the change. Some days, like today, it weighed on him. He reminded himself that the job paid just enough to keep the apartment and Grace's insurance. That was all that mattered. He knelt in front of his daughter, ready to feel the sunshine. She grinned, small and bright. Yes. As he lifted her gently into his arms, Duke rose, falling into step beside them. They moved down the narrow stairwell and out into the humid air. Tampa buzzed around them, bicycle bells, engines, gulls crying over the rooftops. Grace breathed it all in as if memorizing another piece of the world she had never seen. Logan tightened his hold without realizing it. There were moments he feared time was running out, moments he worried he would fail her just as every doctor had failed them. But he walked forward anyway, the summer sunlight glinting off Duke's harness buckle. This was their world for now. A father, a daughter, a loyal dog, and the quiet ache of a hope that refused to die. And though none of them knew it yet, the summer that began in darkness was already shifting toward an afternoon, a beacon, and a discovery that would change their lives forever. Scars of the battlefield and the invisible boy. The afternoon sun drifted lower across the Tampa shoreline, turning the water into a sheet of burning gold. Logan walked slowly beside Grace along the park's cracked pathway, Duke pacing with steady purpose at his left. The breeze carried the scent of salt and sunscreen, and the cicadas in the oak trees hummed loud enough to vibrate through the air. Grace held one hand on Duke's harness and the other on her father's forearm, trusting both without hesitation. Logan scanned the park the way he had once scanned foreign compounds, his gaze shifting from shaded benches to crowds near the splash fountain. Old habits never died. They simply changed theaters. He felt the familiar ache in his knee, a deep pulse that rose whenever the humidity thickened. It wasn't the injury alone that bothered him. It was the memory attached to it. The roar of explosives in a dusty village, the moment the ground vanished beneath him, and the sight of Duke throwing himself across Logan's chest to shield him from falling debris. Duke had limped for weeks afterward. Logan still limped now. Grace tugged gently at his sleeve. "Dad, is the ice cream truck here today?" "I think so," he answered. "I hear the music across the street." She gave a soft smile, the kind that lit her whole face with childlike wonder, even though her eyes remained unfocused. "Can I smell it when it gets close?" "We'll see," he said, though the tightness in his voice betrayed how hard he fought for normal moments like this. Moments where blindness didn't overshadow everything. A shadow detached itself from behind a recycling bin a few yards away. Liam Brooks moved quietly, almost cautiously, his bare feet silent on the pavement. At 11, he was small for his age, with a wiry frame and sun-darkened skin. His hair was a tangled mess of sandy curls, cut unevenly as if done by hand. His clothes were a patchwork of thrift store fabric, shorts too big at the waist, a faded t-shirt with peeling letters. His gray eyes, however, were startlingly alert. They watched everyone and everything, but always from behind a sense of practiced invisibility. Liam stopped near the drinking fountain, pretending to tie a loose shoelace, even though he wasn't wearing shoes. His fingers trembled only slightly. He wasn't afraid exactly, but survival had taught him to be small, quiet, unnoticed. Too much attention could lead to questions he had no answers for. As Logan guided Grace toward the swings, Liam studied them with the trained precision of someone who had learned to read people the way others read street signs. He noticed the way Logan leaned slightly to protect her from passing joggers. He noticed the way Duke matched her pace rather than Logan's. And he noticed most of all how often the little girl touched her right eye, softly, repeatedly, as though trying to relieve a pressure only she could feel. A woman passed by Liam, glancing down at him with polite curiosity. She was middle-aged, tall and thin, with long auburn hair tied neatly in a bun. Her pale green sundress swayed gently in the wind. She smiled briefly, though there was distance behind it, the kind of smile people used when they didn't want to get involved. She continued toward the seawall, her sandals tapping rhythmically. Liam exhaled slowly, attention gone, safe again. On the swings, Grace listened to the creak of the chains as Logan steadied her. She didn't swing high. She preferred small movements, the kind she could predict. Logan's hand hovered near her back, ready to catch her if she misjudged her balance. "Dad," she whispered, "do you think I'll ever see what Duke looks like?" Logan stopped breathing for a moment. He swallowed once, then said with a voice steady only on the surface, "I hope so, sweetheart." He didn't add that hope was all he had left. From his bench, Liam watched Grace turn her head toward the sunlight, her lashes catching the glow. He saw it again, the faint glimmer at the edge of her right eye, a translucent sheen like the surface of a soap bubble. It was nearly invisible unless the light hit it perfectly. Most people would miss it entirely, but not Liam, not the boy whose mother had once shown him how to recognize the subtle changes that meant someone was hurting. A memory rose sharply, his mother's thin fingers guiding his small hands, teaching him how to assess bruises on a neighbor's arm, how to notice the twitch of pain behind a forced smile. She had been a nurse, gentle but unyielding, a woman with warm brown skin and quiet strength, whose voice had carried an unshakable calm. Her illness had turned her into something fragile, yet even then her concern had always been for others. Liam missed her with an ache that lived deep in his ribs. Grace lifted her hand to her eye again. Liam's brow tightened. That wasn't a normal gesture, not repetitive like that, not always the same eye, and not with that faint shimmer he could now see clearly. He stood slowly, brushing dirt from his knees. Duke lifted his head immediately, ears pricking forward, posture shifting into silent vigilance. The dog's amber eyes followed Liam's every step, assessing him with the accuracy of an experienced working canine. Liam froze. Animals were honest. They didn't pretend. They didn't ignore him. In a strange way, that made them scarier. But he knew what he had seen. If he was right, if that was what he thought it was, then the little girl's blindness wasn't untouchable. It wasn't some incurable sentence written into her bones. It might be something else entirely. Something fixable. He took one tentative step closer. Duke gave a low rumble, not a growl, just a warning like distant thunder. Logan turned sharply, instinct flaring in an instant. He positioned himself between the boy and Grace, shoulders tense, jaw locked. His voice was low, but edged with steel. "Son, you need something?" Liam opened his mouth, but his voice caught in his throat. He looked at Logan, at the stern set of his jaw, the disciplined posture, the faint military severity that had outlasted uniform and rank. He shook his head. "No, sir," but his gaze flicked once more to Grace, and Logan saw it. The concern, the recognition, the knowledge. He didn't know it yet, but this moment, this quiet, charged second in a Florida park, would become the turning point of everything. And it would begin with the boy who had mastered the art of being unseen. A summer noon, screeching brakes, and what no one else saw. The sunlight over the Tampa shoreline had shifted into a sharp white blaze, the kind that made the metal rails along the walkway shimmer like liquid. The park was louder now, children shouting, gulls circling over scattered fries, the sharp ding of an ice cream truck weaving through traffic at the edge of the road. The scent of fried food drifted over the seawall, heavy and warm. Logan crouched near Duke, adjusting the service harness so it wouldn't chafe the dog's shoulder. Duke stood patiently, his stance confident, tail low but alert. Sweat clung to Logan's temples, rolling down the edges of his jaw. He blinked against the bright sun, unaware that the seconds ticking past would become some of the most important moments of his life. A high, cheerful jingle played from across the street. Grace lifted her chin. "Is that the truck?" "Yeah, sweetheart," Logan said, his voice softened by habit. "It's close." Grace began drifting toward the sound, one hand trailing along the rusted railing that bordered the walkway. She moved with care, but also with a child's curiosity. Her small sandals clicked lightly on the concrete, the rhythm quickening as the music grew louder. Logan turned for only a moment, only long enough to recheck Duke's buckle. A sound tore through the air, tires shrieking, a horn blaring. Logan's instincts ignited like a detonator. Before he could stand, Duke lunged forward, planting his muscular body between Grace and the curb. His growl was not loud, but it was deep. An unmistakable warning pulled from years of training and instinct. The dog's hackles rose and his amber gaze locked on the approaching cur, but Duke wasn't the only one who moved. From across the grass, Liam Brooks sprinted toward them. The boy's bare feet slapped the ground. his thin frame cutting through the sunlight. He didn't hesitate, not even when the passing car screeched to a halt inches from the crosswalk. He reached Grace in a blink, grabbing her forearm and pulling her backward, straight into safety. Grace gasped, startled. Logan spun around, adrenaline blazing through his bloodstream. His voice came out raw, sharp, edged with fear. "Hey!" He yanked Grace into his arms, shielding her automatically. Duke planted himself in front of both of them, body low, eyes fixed on the boy who had dared to touch his girl. Liam froze. Up close, the boy looked even thinner than Logan had realized. His sandy curls were damp with sweat, sticking to his forehead. Dirt covered his shins like a second skin, but his eyes, those gray watchful eyes, held no fear for himself. Instead, they were locked on Grace with an intensity that startled Logan. I'm sorry," Liam stammered. His voice trembled, but there was no uncertainty in his urgency. She kept touching her right eye. "I've been watching her all morning, and when the sunlight hit, right now, I saw something." Logan's jaw clenched. "Saw what?" "A membrane," Liam said quickly. "A thin, clear layer on her pupil. It's not inside the eye, it's on the surface. If the light hits just right, you can see it. It's almost invisible." His breath quickened, but his gaze did not waver. "My mom, she used to talk about cases like that. She was a nurse. She said cameras and machines can miss it because it's too thin." Grace held Logan's sleeve gently, sensing the tension. Logan lowered himself just enough to face her. "Sweetheart, let me look, okay?" She nodded. He shifted her toward the sun, his heartbeat thudding in his ears. Grace's unfocused eyes glinted under the harsh light. Logan leaned closer, pushing aside every emotion but concentration. There. Barely there, but there. A faint ring, translucent, like a bubble stretched thin, clung to the edge of her pupil. His breath caught. It was real. Liam hadn't imagined it. The boy had noticed something 17 specialists had missed. Behind them, a small crowd had begun forming, park visitors who had seen the near accident. Among them was a tall man named Warren Hale, a retired dock worker with a barrel chest, salt and pepper beard, and a deep voice shaped by a lifetime of shouting over machinery. He stepped closer, concern etched into the lines of his sun-browned face. "She okay?" Warren asked. Logan nodded stiffly. "Yeah, just a scare." Warren tipped his baseball cap and stepped back, giving space without pressing. He was a man who had learned long ago that some families needed silence more than comfort. Logan rose slowly, his mind racing. He turned to Liam. "You said your mother told you about this kind of thing," Logan said, his tone measured but no longer hostile. "How do you know it's the same?" Liam licked his dry lips. "Because she showed me what it looks like. She made me pay attention to tiny details, things people don't notice." His voice softened. "It hurt the patients. They always touch their eyes the same way she does." Grace shifted closer to Logan. "Dad?" He wrapped an arm around her shoulders. "It's okay, sweetheart." But it wasn't okay. Nothing in Logan's world had been okay for 6 years. And yet, something in his chest fluttered, a feeling he hadn't let himself touch in a long time. Hope. A small, fragile hope, but hope all the same. He turned back toward the seawall, toward the boy who still stood barefoot and trembling, unsure if he had crossed a line. Logan cleared his throat. "You saved her from that car." Liam swallowed hard. "I just ran." "You still saved her." Logan's voice was rough, but softer than before. "Thank you." Liam dropped his gaze. Compliments seemed foreign to him, like a language he had never learned. The ice cream truck rolled away, its bell fading. The heat pressed down. Again, but everything felt strangely still. Logan looked at Duke, who finally relaxed his posture. Then he looked at Grace, whose hand once again drifted toward her right eye. And then he looked at Liam, the boy who had seen what no one else had ever seen. The boy who might hold the answer he had spent 6 years praying for. The boy who, for the first time in a long time, made Logan believe the darkness in his daughter's life might not be permanent after all. 30 seconds that changed the summer. The sky above Tampa blazed white as the afternoon sun reached its highest point, bleaching the tops of the palm trees and glinting off every metal surface in the park. The heat pressed down in a thick wave, but no one in the small cluster gathered near the stainless steel drinking fountain seemed aware of it. All focus had narrowed to Grace Carter, her trembling lashes, her parted lips, her stillness that sat on the edge of fear and hope. Logan moved with the controlled precision of someone who had handled countless field emergencies. His hands dug into the front pocket of his backpack until he found the compact first aid kit he always carried. He disinfected Liam's hands thoroughly, the sharp scent of alcohol rising into the humid air. His fingers brushed the boy's skin, and only then did he fully realize how thin Liam was. The bones at his wrist were prominent, the skin a patchwork of sunburn and road dirt. Yet the boy's posture didn't waver. He stood steady, gray eyes focused entirely on Grace. Duke maintained his position like a living shield. The German shepherd's muscles were taut beneath his coat, eyes fixed on Liam's hands, waiting for the slightest wrong movement. Even in the overwhelming sun, Duke's discipline held. Ears forward, breath slow, tail stiff with readiness. He was a soldier still, even if he no longer wore a military vest. Grace stood between Logan and Liam, her small fingers curled around her father's. She took one careful breath. Her world had always been composed of sounds and textures. Now something different hovered at its edge, something she didn't have a name for yet. "Ready?" Liam asked softly. Grace nodded, though her voice caught. "I think so." Liam gently tilted her chin upward, turning her so the slanting angle of the sun illuminated her right eye. The translucent membrane glimmered faintly, as if the light had revealed a secret no one else had been patient enough to notice. Logan felt his heartbeat drum against his ribs. His chest tightened with the helplessness he had carried for 6 long years and the terrifying possibility that he might lose everything in one wrong moment. "Go slow," he whispered, though Liam was already moving with extraordinary care. Liam steadied both hands, the tips of his fingers barely touching the fragile edge of the membrane. The boy's concentration was absolute, shaped by years of watching his mother work in crowded clinics. She had been a woman with deep brown skin and soft hazel eyes, her hair pulled back into a braid that brushed her shoulders. A nurse who smiled with her whole face, who used her voice to calm crying patients and whispered medical explanations to Liam as if he were an apprentice instead of a child. She had taught him gentleness first, accuracy next. He used both now. The membrane lifted, slowly, reluctantly, like an old film peeling from glass. Grace inhaled sharply, but did not pull away. Duke tensed, ready to intervene, but Logan held a quiet hand to keep the dog calm. The next seconds stretched long and fragile. When the membrane finally separated, it came away in a thin, glistening strip that seemed almost unreal in Liam's trembling fingers. He let it fall into Logan's open palm. The world changed before it hit his skin. Grace blinked. Once, twice. Her breath shuddered. Then she gasped, as a broken, bewildered sound as her pupils contracted against a sudden rush of light she had never known. Her hands flew toward her face, not to cover her eyes, but to see them, to see anything at all. "Dad?" Her voice cracked like sunlight through storm clouds. "Dad, Her gaze rose, and for the first time, it landed on the face she had spent her life learning only through touch. She startled at the sight of him, his square jaw, the lines worn from years of exhaustion, the deep brown eyes that had never stopped watching over her. Tears gathered at her lashes, sparkling like glass under the summer sun. Logan's knees nearly buckled. He dropped to the ground, arms around her before he knew he was moving. A sob escaped him, not the sharp terror of battlefield grief, but something softer and larger, breaking open a place in him he thought war had sealed forever. Grace buried her face in his shirt for a moment, overwhelmed. Then she pulled back, staring at his features again, memorizing every angle with wide, trembling amazement. "I can see you," she whispered. "Dad, I can really see you." Logan pressed his forehead to hers, unable to speak. When he finally lifted his gaze, it went straight to Liam. The boy stood frozen, unsure if he should stay or run. The sunlight caught the dust on his skin, the frayed edges of his shirt, the exhaustion in his shoulders. Children were not supposed to look that tired, but hope flickered in his eyes, hesitant, fragile, as if he didn't believe he had the right to it. Logan rose and stepped toward him. Liam's breath hitched. Duke watched closely, but his posture eased when Logan knelt in front of the boy. "You changed her life," Logan said, voice unsteady in a way that startled even him. "You changed mine." Liam swallowed. I thought I should help." "You did." Logan rested a hand briefly on the boy's shoulder. "And I won't let you go back to the streets after this. Not tonight. Not ever again without a choice." A few people nearby had paused to watch. Among them, a woman named Sarah Reed, who stood near the fountain holding her toddler's hand. Sarah was a petite woman in her early 30s, with warm olive skin and wavy dark hair pulled into a loose ponytail. Her expressive eyes widened at what she had just witnessed. She murmured something to her child, then gave Logan a discreet nod of respect before walking on. She understood silent miracles. She had lived long enough to know how rare they were. Logan turned to Liam again. "You're coming home with us tonight." The boy's lips parted. "Me?" "Yes," Logan said simply. Duke stepped closer to Liam, sniffing once as if making his own assessment. The dog's tension melted into quiet acceptance. His judgment was clear. Grace stepped forward too, blinking against the new world she was seeing for the first time. "Liam," she whispered, her voice shaky but bright. "You saved me." Liam lowered his head, overwhelmed by words he had never expected to hear. That night, Logan contacted a veterans outreach volunteer he trusted, Pastor John Marwell, a tall, gentle man in his late 50s with thinning blonde hair and kind blue eyes. John didn't ask questions. He simply arranged temporary guardianship paperwork and connected Logan with a local shelter network. His steady voice and calm reassurances helped anchor the emotional storm of the day. By the time the sun dipped behind the gulf, 3 figures, 1 man, 1 child, and 1 boy who had lived too long without a home, walked up the narrow stairs to Logan's apartment. Duke followed them, tail relaxed, head high. The lights inside were the same as they had always been, but the room felt brighter, because for the first time, Grace could see it, and for the first time, Liam belonged somewhere. Caps, gowns, and the captain, who knew his name. The Florida summer returned like a familiar drumbeat, heavy and bright, settling over the Naval Community College campus with a heat that clung like a second skin. Sunlight spilled across the courtyard in broad strokes, catching on rows of folding chairs and the blue and white banners swaying gently in the breeze. The smell of fresh-cut grass mixed with sunscreen and lacquered wood from the newly polished stage. Logan Carter stood alone at the back of the auditorium, the cool indoor air brushing against his face as if inviting him into a world he did not quite belong to. He wore his dark janitorial uniform, the name patch Logan stitched neatly above the pocket. The fabric had faded over the years, but it was always clean, always ironed, a habit from a life marked by discipline. His shoulders were still broad, but age had softened some lines and deepened others. The streaks of silver at his temples had spread, painting the sides of his head in a quiet frost. His beard, trimmed and even, framed a jaw set with both pride and humility. His gait had improved. The old knee injury no longer forced every step to be a negotiation with pain, though it still whispered reminders on humid days. At his side, Duke moved slower than before. The German shepherd's muzzle had whitened, his stride careful, deliberate, but the harness, service dog, do not pet, remained firm across his aging shoulders, and his eyes still carried the warm amber vigilance that had protected this family for over a decade. "Easy, old boy," Logan murmured, resting a hand on Duke's back. From the front rows, young adults in navy gowns laughed nervously, adjusting their mortarboards. Logan's daughter was among them. Grace Carter, now 21, stood poised and radiant in her dark academic regalia. Her once small and hesitant hands were steady, her posture confident. Her hair, now longer and darker, framed a face that had learned to see the world not just with her eyes, but with her heart. And those eyes, once clouded, once trapped in darkness, shone with clear light. She turned her head, scanning the room with practiced familiarity, searching for someone she knew would keep to the shadows. She found him quickly. When she waved, she did it with the kind of joy that felt like a sunrise. Beside her sat Liam, now 18, tall and sturdy from years of proper meals and stability. His sandy curls, once unkempt, were trimmed neatly. His gray eyes still carried that sharp edge of awareness, but now softened by belonging. He wore a simple collared shirt under a borrowed blazer. The sleeves were a little short, but he wore them with quiet pride. "Dad's hiding," Liam whispered to Grace, nudging her shoulder. "He always hides before he cries." Grace gave him a playful elbow. "He doesn't cry." Liam raised an eyebrow. "Uh-huh. Sure." The ceremony began with the usual speeches, encouraging, repetitive, but comforting in their predictability. Parents dabbed at their eyes. Professors adjusted their glasses. The dean, a tall, thin man with a narrow face and silver-framed glasses, spoke with deliberate pauses, his calm voice filling the hall. And then, when names began to be called, the air shifted. "Grace Carter!" Applause rose. Grace stepped forward, her gown swaying softly as she crossed the stage. Her eyes sparkled beneath the lights. Pride radiated from her so visibly that Logan's breath caught, but instead of handing Grace her diploma immediately, the dean lifted a hand. "At this time," he said, "we have a special presentation." A woman stepped onto the stage. Captain Amanda Ross of the United States Navy carried herself with the composed authority of someone who had lived through storms without flinching. She was in her late 40s, tall and lean, with sun-bronzed skin and short black hair streaked subtly with silver. Her uniform was immaculate, her ribbons precise, her posture impossibly straight. Her deep-set hazel eyes surveyed the auditorium with confidence and intention. "Good afternoon," she said, her voice clear. "Before we continue, I want to honor someone whose service has not been confined to a battlefield." Logan stiffened. She continued, her words echoing across the silent hall. "Years ago, a Navy SEAL came home wounded, not only in body, but carrying the weight of raising a daughter who had never seen a ray of light. He worked nights, he asked for nothing, he served without applause, and all while doing the humble work that keeps this institution alive." Grace's eyes widened. Liam sat forward in his seat. Duke's ears flicked up. Captain Ross looked out into the crowd. "Mr. Logan Carter, would you join us on stage?" The sound of hundreds of heads turning at once was almost theatrical. Logan felt heat rise along his neck. Every instinct told him to disappear, to fade into a wall or find a door. But Grace had already seen him. She mouthed, "Come here, Dad." He swallowed hard and stepped down the aisle. Duke walked beside him, slow but dignified. When Logan reached the stage, Captain Ross offered her hand. Up close, he noticed faint crow's feet around her eyes, evidence of a life spent squinting into harsh winds and harsher realities. "It's an honor," she told him quietly. Logan managed a nod. The captain addressed the audience again. "Today we award Mr. Carter a naval commendation for service and community dedication, and in recognition of the dog who stood by him through deployments, recovery, and raising two remarkable children, we are establishing the Duke Grant, a scholarship for future ophthalmic nurses and vision researchers." Applause erupted like a breaking wave. Grace hurried across the stage and threw her arms around her father. Liam joined, gripping Logan with the kind of embrace that held years of gratitude in its silence. Sunlight streamed through the tall windows, bathing them in warm gold. Logan closed his eyes briefly, overwhelmed. When he opened them, he understood with quiet clarity. He was no longer a man defined by old scars or janitorial uniforms. He was a father whose love had carried 3 lives from darkness into light. And it had all begun long ago, with a summer afternoon, a ringing ice cream truck, a loyal German shepherd, and a barefoot boy brave enough to step out of invisibility. Some people say miracles belong only to ancient stories, carved into stone or whispered in old churches. But what happened to Logan, Grace, Liam, and one loyal German shepherd reminds us that heaven still moves quietly through ordinary days. Sometimes God sends help in the shape of a tired single father. Sometimes he sends it in the soft steps of an aging dog. And sometimes he chooses a child who has almost nothing, yet carries the courage to change everything. If you've ever felt unseen, unheard, or unsure of your place in this world, hold on to this truth. God's light often arrives when we least expect it, and through people we never imagined. Even a single act of kindness can open a doorway out of darkness, just as it did for Grace. So, as you go back into your own life, your job, your worries, your silent battles, remember that heaven is not far. It leans close to those who struggle. It lifts those who bend, and it honors those who love without asking anything in return. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who needs a reminder that miracles still walk among us. Write a comment about where you are watching from, so we can pray for your family by name. And don't forget to subscribe, so each new story brings a little more hope into your home. May God bless you, guard your steps, and shine light on every road you walk, just as He did for them. Amen.